There are very few people on Earth who share a body the way Abby and Brittany Hensel do. Not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. Literally one torso, two heads, two hearts, two sets of lungs, and a lifetime spent learning how to move, speak, and exist as two complete individuals inside a single physical form. For 30 years, the world has watched their story unfold in pieces. A talk show appearance here, a documentary there, a reality series that came and went, and then, out of nowhere, a headline in 2024 that sent the internet into overdrive. This is the real story, built only on what has actually been confirmed, reported, and set on the record, not speculation, not invented family drama, and not imagined conversations. Just the facts of two extraordinary lives. Abby and Brittany Hensel were born on March 7, 1990, in Carver County, Minnesota, to parents Patty and Mike Hensel. What makes their birth especially remarkable is that almost nobody, including their own mother, knew there were two babies coming. During the pregnancy, ultrasound imaging only ever showed what looked like a single fetus. One twin's body was positioned in a way that obscured the other, so doctors and the Hensels themselves believed they were expecting one child. Patty has said she went into the hospital fully expecting to deliver a single baby, only to discover in the delivery room that she had given birth to conjoined twins. Abby and Brittany are what's known medically as dicephalic parapagous twins. That term describes a specific and extremely rare form of conjoined twinning in which two separate heads and necks are joined to a single torso. Each sister has her own head, her own neck, her own heart, her own set of lungs, her own stomach, and her own spine. But below that point, their bodies merge into one shared structure, one rib cage, one pelvis, one set of reproductive organs, and one pair of arms and one pair of legs between them. Abby controls the right arm and right leg. Brittany controls the left arm and left leg. Everything below the waist, including their bloodstream, is shared between them. Conjoined twins of any kind are exceptionally rare, occurring in roughly 1 out of every 200,000 live births, and the vast majority do not survive infancy. Dicephalic parapagous twins are rarer still, and historically most have been stillborn or have died within their first day of life. Abby and Brittany surviving into infancy was already considered remarkable by the medical community. Surviving into adulthood as healthy, independent, working adults made them one of the most studied and most publicly recognized sets of conjoined twins alive today. When Abby and Brittany were born, doctors presented Patty and Mike Hensel with an agonizing choice: attempt a separation surgery or raise their daughters as they were. Physicians were honest about the risks. A separation procedure carried a serious chance that one or both girls would not survive it, and even in a best-case outcome, one or both could have been left with significant lifelong disability. Patty and Mike chose not to pursue separation. Mike Hensel later spoke about that decision in a 2001 interview with Time magazine, framing the choice in the simplest possible terms, that there was no way to choose one daughter's chance at a more typical life over the other's chance to survive at all. The family's decision meant that Abby and Brittany would grow up sharing a single body, and it meant their parents would spend the next 2 decades helping them build lives that felt, as much as possible, like anyone else's. That commitment to normalcy became the defining philosophy of the Hensel household. Patty and Mike raised their daughters with separate identities from the very beginning. They dressed them differently, encouraged different interests, and treated them, in every way that mattered, as two distinct people who simply happened to share a body. That distinction, two people, one body, is something Abby and Brittany have spent their entire public lives trying to get the world to understand. Every physical skill most children take for granted had to be built from scratch and built together for Abby and Brittany. Crawling, walking, clapping, swimming, playing sports. None of it could happen unless both sisters coordinated in real time, using two brains to operate what is, physically, one connected set of limbs. They learned to walk by trial and error as toddlers, essentially teaching two nervous systems to move a shared body in sync. As they grew older, that coordination extended into far more complex activities. They learned to swim. They played volleyball and basketball. They learned to type, each controlling one hand, developing a two-handed rhythm that let them write and complete tasks that would ordinarily require one person's full coordination. Perhaps the most talked about example of their teamwork is driving. Each sister earned her own driver's license, having to individually pass the driving test using her own controlled limb. On the show, Abby and Brittany, they explained their system in unison. They hold two separate licenses, and when driving, one sister controls the gas and brake pedals while both sisters share responsibility for steering, with the other handling the turn signal. None of this coordination was instinctive. It was built the same way any skill is built, through repetition, trial, error, and an enormous amount of patience, both from the girls themselves and from parents determined not to let their daughter's condition define what they were capable of. Some things about sharing a body remain permanently outside either sister's individual control. In a 2013 interview with the BBC, Abby and Brittany discussed how certain physical reactions belong to one twin's body and not the other's, even though they share a single circulatory system. Brittany's heart rate rises when she drinks coffee, while Abby feels no such effect. Brittany is also afraid of heights, which makes an activity like a roller coaster a source of real anxiety for her, even if Abby, who doesn't share the fear, would otherwise enjoy it. Living together in one body means constantly negotiating those differences, what to eat, what activity to do, even something as small as whether to ride an amusement park attraction. Despite sharing a torso, Abby and Brittany have never presented themselves as a single unit with two heads. From childhood on, their parents worked to preserve two separate identities, and as adults the twins have continued that effort in small, deliberate ways. For special occasions, their clothing is custom-tailored so each twin's neckline sits correctly for her own body, since Brittany is shorter than Abby. At times they've worn trousers in two different colors, split down the middle, simply so each sister could choose her own look rather than default to a single shared outfit. Their personalities and tastes diverge just as clearly. In that same BBC interview, Abby described her sister's taste as leaning toward neutral tones and classic pieces like pearls, while she herself preferred brighter, bolder colors. Their interests split along similar lines. Abby has gravitated toward math and science, while Brittany has shown a stronger pull toward the arts. It's the kind of ordinary sibling contrast most families would barely notice, except that in Abby and Brittany's case, those two different people are expressing themselves through one shared set of hands, one face for the camera, and one body moving through the world. Even as teenagers, long before either sister met a future spouse, they spoke about wanting conventional milestones for themselves, including marriage and eventually children, treating those goals as their own personal aspirations rather than as questions the public had any right to weigh in on. Over the years, particularly as adults, both sisters have become more guarded about discussing their romantic lives publicly, which is part of why Abby's 2021 wedding stayed private for as long as it did. Abby and Brittany's public life began earlier than most people realize. In 1996, at 6 years old, the twins appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, which introduced them to a national audience for the first time. From that point forward, the Hensels became one of the most recognizable and most discussed sets of conjoined twins in the world. In 2003, the twins were the subject of a documentary called Joined for Life, which offered an early, in-depth look at their daily routines, their coordination, and their family's approach to raising them. A few years later, in December 2006, they appeared in another televised feature discussing their lives as they entered their teenage years. Throughout this period, Patty Hensel became something of a spokesperson for the family, fielding questions from journalists and documentary crews about decisions the family had made and about what life looked like day to day for two girls sharing one body. Growing up under that level of public attention came with obvious challenges. People stared in public. Strangers asked invasive questions. The girls had to learn, from a young age, how to navigate curiosity that ranged from genuinely well-meaning to outright rude. According to their own comments over the years, their parents made a deliberate choice never to let public fascination become an excuse for their daughters to limit their ambitions. The twins have said publicly that they were raised to believe they could do essentially anything they set their minds to. Despite constant attention, Abby and Brittany moved through a fairly typical academic path. They attended public school in Minnesota, took part in extracurricular activities, and by all accounts handled the scrutiny of their peers with the same steady resilience that characterized the rest of their childhood. In 2012, They graduated from Bethel University in Minnesota with bachelor's degrees in education. That same year, they began their careers as elementary school teachers, eventually settling into teaching 4th and 5th grade. Because they function as two separate professionals doing the work of one classroom position, the twins have discussed openly and candidly the unusual employment arrangement this creates. Speaking to the BBC, they noted that although the school understandably started them on a single salary since they were doing the work of one employee, they hoped that as they built experience, and given that they hold two separate degrees and can offer two distinct teaching perspectives, they'd eventually be able to negotiate accordingly. Their choice of profession has not been treated as incidental by those who know them. Teaching young children put Abby and Brittany in a position to model something they've lived their entire lives. That being different isn't something to fear or hide from. 4th and 5th graders, by nature, ask blunt questions, and the twins have said they've never treated that curiosity as something to be ashamed of. They answer what they're comfortable answering and keep private what they choose to keep private, treating their classrooms as spaces where students learn, by direct example. That difference is simply a part of being human. In 2012, the same year they graduated college, Abby and Brittany became the subjects of their own reality series on TLC, titled Abby and Brittany. The show ran for 8 episodes and followed the twins as they transitioned out of college and into adult life, traveling to Europe, learning to drive, and navigating the beginning of their teaching careers. It offered viewers one of the most detailed looks yet at how the sisters function as two independent people sharing one body, while also showing the ordinary, everyday texture of their lives, friendships, travel, family dinners, and the small logistics of getting through a normal day. The series ended after a single season, and the twins largely stepped back from television and mainstream media appearances in the years that followed. That retreat from the spotlight wasn't accidental. As adults, Abby and Brittany made a clear and consistent choice to control what parts of their lives the public got to see, engaging with media on their own terms rather than constantly, and choosing privacy as their default setting once they were old enough to make that call for themselves. For roughly a decade after Abby and Brittany ended, the twins kept a relatively low public profile. They continued teaching. They continued living in Minnesota, the state where they were born and raised. And they largely stopped granting interviews or participating in documentaries, choosing instead to let their lives play out privately, away from cameras and headlines. That didn't mean public fascination disappeared. If anything, the quiet only seemed to intensify curiosity about what had happened to the twins since their show ended. Speculation about their personal lives, their relationships, and their futures circulated periodically online throughout the years they stayed out of the public eye. But without confirmation from the family, most of it remained just that, speculation. In March 2024, that changed. Reporting from Today.com, based on public marriage records, revealed that Abby Hensel had gotten married. According to those records, Abby married Josh Bowling, a nurse and United States Army veteran, and the two had actually married back in November 2021, meaning the marriage had already been a private, established part of Abby's life for roughly 3 years before the public learned about it. The reveal came through public documentation rather than an announcement from the family. Once the marriage became public knowledge, photos and video clips from the wedding itself began surfacing on social media, some posted by members of Bowling's own family. One clip, originally shared to Facebook by Bowling's mother, Heidi, showed the newlyweds dancing together at their wedding reception, with Brittany present beside her sister throughout the celebration, just as she has been present for essentially every major moment of Abby's life. Wedding photos that circulated showed Abby in a white, sleeveless bridal gown, with Brittany in a matching lace dress beside her, and Bowling in a gray suit. The ceremony and reception photos made clear what many had assumed but never had confirmed, that Brittany was not a bystander to her sister's wedding, but an active, present part of it, standing beside Abby as she has for every significant milestone of their shared life. The story didn't stay static once the initial news broke. Weeks after the March 2024 report, Abby and Brittany were photographed out in public for the first time since the news had surfaced, with Abby visibly wearing her wedding ring. In May of that year, the twins shared their own wedding photos directly on their TikTok account for the first time, rather than leaving the story to circulate only through leaked family photos and secondhand reporting. In June, They posted a short clip of Abby and Bowling's first dance from the reception. And at the end of 2024, the sisters posted a year-in-review TikTok montage that included wedding photos alongside other memories from the year, suggesting a couple who, having had the news forced into the open, chose afterward to engage with it on their own terms rather than continue avoiding the subject entirely. Family photos shared since 2024 show Abby and Brittany spending time with Bowling's daughter, Isabella, who was around 8 years old at the time the marriage became public. Isabella served as flower girl at the wedding itself, and social media images posted since show her on hikes and vacations with her father, Abby, and Brittany. In effect, the marriage didn't just connect Abby to Josh, it extended the family the twins share to include a stepdaughter as well. Once the marriage became public, attention naturally turned to who Abby had married. Josh Bowling is a nurse and a United States Army veteran who served multiple overseas deployments, including time stationed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Reporting on his background noted that this marriage is not his first. Bowling was previously married to a woman named Anika Bowling, with whom he shares a daughter, Isabella. That earlier marriage ended in divorce, with Anika filing in 2019 and the divorce being finalized the following year. Bowling's daughter Isabella has appeared in family photos alongside Abby and Brittany, including at the wedding itself, based on since-deleted social media posts from Bowling. Following the marriage becoming public, Bowling largely maintained a similar approach to privacy as his wife and sister-in-law, generally declining to comment extensively on the more intrusive questions that followed the announcement, including persistent online speculation in later years about whether he and Abby had had a child together, a rumor Bowling has publicly declined to confirm or deny, and one that neither Abby nor Brittany has addressed directly. It's worth understanding why a private marriage between two adults became such a significant news story in the first place. Abby and Brittany's entire adult life has been shaped by an unusual and deeply personal question that strangers have asked them for decades. What happens to one twin's independence, autonomy, and personal life when she's permanently, physically connected to another person? Marriage sits at the center of that question in a way almost nothing else does. It's one of the most personal decisions a person can make, and for Abby, it necessarily involved her sister in a way that marriage doesn't for most people. The public reaction to the news reflected that tension. Some of the response was genuine well-wishing. A source who spoke to In Touch at the time described Abby and Josh as happy together and grateful for their relationship. But a significant portion of the public reaction online focused less on celebrating the couple and more on picking apart the logistics of their situation. Questions about intimacy, about Brittany's role, about what a normal married life could possibly look like under these circumstances. Abby and Brittany have addressed that kind of scrutiny directly in the past, though not always gently. When pressed by a television crew member about whether they owed the public a fuller explanation of their lives, Brittany responded plainly that they didn't owe the world anything, and that neither she nor her sister felt any obligation to satisfy public curiosity about matters they considered private. That comment, made years before the marriage became public, captures the boundary the twins have tried to hold for their entire adult lives. They will share what they choose to share, and nothing more. Following the wave of criticism and invasive commentary that followed the marriage news, Abby and Brittany also addressed the backlash directly through social media, posting a video in which they responded to critics by pointing out that continuing to watch and comment on their lives, even negatively, still made someone a fan of their story rather than simply a bystander. To understand why Abby, that same instinct shows up in how the twins talk about their careers, too. Rather than treating their condition as something that needed to be hidden or minimized in a professional setting, Abby and Brittany chose an occupation that put them directly in front of curious young minds every day. Elementary-age students, by nature, ask the kinds of blunt, unfiltered questions adults are often too polite to voice out loud. According to the twins, they've never treated that curiosity as a problem to manage. Instead, they answer what they're willing to answer, decline what they'd rather keep private, and let the interaction itself demonstrate that being different doesn't require an apology. It's a philosophy that traces directly back to how their own parents handled the same kind of curiosity when Abby and Brittany were children themselves. Not everything published about Abby and Brittany over the years has been accurate, because they've spent most of their adult lives declining interviews, Gaps in verified information have periodically been filled in by outlets willing to present speculation, secondhand claims, or outright fabrication.